Well, happy, healthy, beautiful day to you guys. Eric Higgins here, holistic health coach and actor calling out of Portugal. Today, we're talking about mastering your mindset with functional medicine with none other than Dr. Bob Rakowski. So we're doing this call today to really highlight the importance of mindset. How are some of the other elements of our health that can tie into creating our best life with our best mindset? Because there might be some things you may have missed or not fully understood that play a pretty key role in the overall scheme of things when it comes to our health and how everything ties together. So Dr. Bob is someone that I've worked with for over 8 years now, someone who has exudes success in every area of his life when it comes to business, when it comes to family life, when it comes to friendships, relationships, and spirituality. And success leaves clues. So we're going to talk about how does functional medicine tie into creating our best health, but also our greatest mindset to go out and live our absolute best life. So Dr. Bob has spent 33 years now in clinical practice in Houston, Texas, head of the Natural Medical Center there, and has really educated people from all walks of life, whether they are Olympic athletes to regular people who are just, living their lives, normal lives, to come back to their absolute best health, given some terrible news, being written off by the medical system, sent home to die. And thankfully, I've gotten some great advice, some paradigm shifts from Dr. Bob around health and how to create better health. And thankfully, are alive and well today. So you're in for a treat, guys. We're going to learn about our mindset. We're going to learn about how the body connects, how the gut connects, and a few things in there between certain strategies that we love to share on a global scale that really allow us to really up our game when it comes to our functional health and fitness. So Dr. Bob, welcome to the call. Welcome everyone on Zoom to the call who's watching on Instagram. Great to have you guys here. We're super pumped to be able to share some knowledge with you today.
Well, I thank you always for the beautiful introduction. And, you're so modest. My nickname for you is the Irish Superman, but you might be more like Thor, especially after the Norseman, right? So there you are, center stage. You really should have been the lead character. That'll be the next time. But talk about excellence. You and Issa, two of my favorites, one of the top power couples on the planet, ready, willing, and able to help hundreds of thousands around the globe, if not by pure example and inspiration, by sharing game-changing, life-changing products. So I love and appreciate you. So thanks for being amazing.
Likewise, Dr. Bob, likewise. But really when it comes to it, we're all we're all in our own journey. We're all in our own sailboat, as Jim Rohn would say, and the same wind blows on us all. I mentioned this before, and it's true. We all have challenges in our lives. We all have these things to overcome, but they're essentially are the makings of us or the breakings of us. So for someone who's created so much success in their life, how important is it to have a rock solid mindset in order to create massive abundance in your life?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's certainly got to be within the top four. And many people would make an argument that it's in the top one. So I like Robin Sharma. He says when you wake up in the morning, you want to do a mindset, a heart set, a soul set, and a health set. All of these things you want to pay attention to. And there's spiritual people that say, look, we're mostly spiritual. We ought to pay attention to mostly spiritual. And by the way, I believe that's true that we're mostly spiritual, but understand at this point, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. So why not work on that physicality? But what drives the body, but the mind? And when they're talking about the heart set, they're not talking about the physical heart. They're talking about love, which of course we want to share with everybody in every way we possibly can. But that mindset, you start talking about the body. Have you ever moved and not consciously decided to do that? Have you ever ate anything and not consciously decided to do that? Have you ever stayed up late and deprived yourself of sleep and not essentially consciously made that decision one way or the other, right? So some people might say circumstances do it. I remember Zig Ziglar years ago saying, you know what, no one ever forced me to eat anything. He says, even if my parents said, you're going to sit in that chair until that broccoli's gone, he says, I made the decision to eat the broccoli, and so sadly, people make decisions to put bad things in their body, mind, and spirit. So hopefully we can help them with that. But mindset, make that good choice. And good choices compound, just like bad choices compound.
They sure do. And really, this comes down to disciplines. Easy to say, not always easy to do. And I don't know who quoted this, but they said, I would rather watch someone's feet than ever watch their lips. So really, I think it was Jeff Roberti who mentioned that yesterday on a training call, but it's true, taking action is where the disciplines come from. And I'm curious, Dr. Bob, what are some of your daily disciplines that have allowed you to create this amount of success and happiness so far?
Well, I'm going to have all of them, right? You got to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right. We're mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, social, financial, impactful. But if we talk about the big four, stress, toxins, malnutrition, physical inactivity, Do I have ways of buffering stress? You better believe it. A great day starts the night before. So one of my disciplines is consistently making sure I get to bed early, that I budget enough time to nourish my body, mind, and spirit. As one of my mentors said, without good sleep, we're all tall 2-year-olds. Then now Milo's wanting to go outside. You start looking at the first hour in the morning. I'm going to follow Robin Sharma with that power hour, and I'm going to make sure I move my body. And so since I took on that discipline, I'll tell people that my training has evolved over the years, from wanting to be a very ballistic, weightlifting type athlete, which I did for a number of years until I paid a price with injury, to suddenly shifting to more martial arts. And, understand that every human being goes through different phases of life. And I think it was Carl Jung that said, there's a time when young men are warriors, and you probably will never lose that. You'll always be a warrior. But then ultimately they become a family man, and then they become a sage to the community. And that's really the progression. And you look at some of these great masters over time, they were phenomenal warriors in their younger days, became family men, and then community leaders. But we want to have that physical set all together. Now, what about heart set? You mentioned Bob Proctor as we were starting, but it was a conversation he had with Sandy Gallagher, who was his business partner for years. And she was going through a bad divorce. And he said, Bob, this is really challenging. What do you recommend that I do? And he says, send your ex or soon to be ex love every single day. And in fact, if anybody's ever bothering you or, gets under your skin or in your space in a way that you don't want in your mental space, send them love, because love is the ultimate force really in the universe. So that heart set, I'm going to send love to people. I'm going to do my best to be loving to everybody all the way around. And you know what? I just had the most heartwarming message from Pete Cohen talking about Hannah's amazing recovery. She beat brain cancer twice. And I think I want to play it. I wonder if it'll come through, because I do want to play that, because warm my heart, and it might warm the heart of people here. But we talk about heart set. Let me play this for you. And by the way, I keep it at time and a half speed, maybe even twice the speed, but here, I'm going to play it right now. So here it goes.
Hello, my friend. Happy, beautiful, amazing day. I hope you're well. We are in Düsseldorf again. Hannah is doing so well, Dr. Bob. It'd be great to talk to you about it. It'd be great to do something on Zoom about it. Honestly, we're almost ready. They're going to create a paper on Hannah and get it published in a scientific journal because of the progress that she's making. It is miraculous, and I can't thank you enough, because I don't think you realise that I had almost given up, and I have to tell you that. But it was you were the most instrumental person in just making me think, well, I cannot give up. And I know that might seem hard for you to comprehend, how Pete Cohen, who is Cohenetic, I just didn't. There was part of me that just could not see a way out of where we were. But it was you. It was you more than anybody else. So as much as you're a doctor and you have the advice, but you gave me so much more than that. You gave me what in the Jewish tribe we call the chutzpah. It's like you got to go. You can't settle for what you're currently experiencing. So I'm very, very grateful to you, and I want to know what I can do for you.
I'll pause it right there. Then he went into a different case they wanted to talk about. I hope you heard that okay, but that's so warmed my heart yesterday. But when Pete and I were struggling, I said, all right, let's take a step back for a moment. One, she beat brain cancer once. She beat the unbeatable. She's perfectly capable. You inspire people all over the world. You inspire me every day. And I'm here for you. Whatever you need, any time of day or night, call. I'm here for you. But here's what I know. Together, you can beat this. Go beat it. In fact, together, we can beat it. Let's all do it together. And you were such a big part of that. You and Isa putting together your fitness challenge, your functional fat loss challenge, getting people moving better, being better, to raise money for a therapy that medicine won't pay for. Probably, the most aggressive brain cancer you can have, glioblastoma, she beat because they thought outside the box, because they had a strong support community. And while we're on this topic, we basically blended all of our resources together. None of us are as strong as all of us. None of us are as smart as all of us, but together there's almost nothing we can't do. So, so when we look at that mindset, heart set, soul set, health set, well, health set, you know what? I will every single day eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right. And, all of it is going to come back to making the choice to do it. That's the mindset, but they are all intertwined. This beautiful web, if you don't have the mindset right, most of the things around you are going to fall apart.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that, Dr. Bob. And just to solidify what Pete had said there as well, that how important a role you played in that, and the support role there for Pete, almost like a father figure as well, Dr. Bob. And I felt that as well in the past, that you have that power, and it doesn't go unnoticed. It really doesn't. And for Pete, I'm sure that was invaluable. I know it was invaluable for him. But just on that topic, when you're dealing with patients who come into your clinic, and I know you deal with cancer patients and different people who are dealing with all kinds of challenges, and you can never overpromise, especially if they've not created the right conditions for health. But how do you handle that kind of conversation when someone comes into your clinic who is maybe stage 4 or, is kind of losing hope? What advice do you give to that person in that situation?
Well, let's turn back the clock 12 years ago by conversation with Hannah Poling. Not Hannah Poling. Hannah Poling was a different case. Hannah Bradley at the time, who became Hannah Bradley Cohen. When Hannah came into the clinic, brain cancer, failed surgery, cognition wasn't really there. No hope was being given by the medical profession. And I sat her down and had a heart-to-heart conversation, put my hands on her shoulders. I said, look, beautiful lady, you've got a long life ahead of you. There's so much vitality in you. If we can just start funneling it towards beating this, you can win. You can win. And I see that you have tremendous support here. That was the first time I ever met Pete Cohen. But, I tell people I've seen many, many times where I'll see a wife come in with a husband or a female come in with a male partner. It's far less common to have that male step up the same way for that female. And maybe all of us males can get a little kick in the pants and a little tug on the heartstrings. We need to be there for our beautiful ladies, through thick and thin, no matter what. And how wonderful that Pete was there. But I said, you can beat this. Let's start now. Let's win. And Pete filmed me. He says, how can you say this? How can you say this? They're not giving her any hope. I said, that's no man's call, right? How long you're here is between you and God. And I'm not going to say I'm going to make that call, but here's what I can tell you. You can win. Let's win. And that's the conversation we have. And by the way, I've had people that were in hospice on palliative care. The family snuck them out to come see me. We put them on a protocol. And some people from hospice are now, decades later, cancer-free and still thriving. So does man ever know? No, man never knows. Man never knows. Just that simple.
If in doubt, get him out and get him to Dr. Bob. That's just the way of it, get yourself in a position to win. It's like anything, position yourself around those people with the knowledge set, the heart set, and that action set, if you would, that just puts those things in place, rather than just drifting along to see what the course may be. But thank you for sharing that, because it's such a sensitive topic for people who are in that situation. But if you guys are on this call and someone who's going through a situation like that where they don't know how long they have, just be that support for them, and maybe reach out to Dr. Rakowski on his Instagram. I believe he is doing online consultations. No one's out until they're out. So if the willingness is there, the openness to live is there, I believe the rest is mastermind. Get the right people around you. But speaking of which, Dr. Bob, you mentioned Bob Proctor. I'd love to ask you, who are some of your favorite thought leaders and mentors to you that really helped you on your journey to create success and health and happiness?
Well, if we go back to the guy that really first pushed my buttons, like many in my age category, it was Tony Robbins. You start looking at him, and maybe his first book or one of the first ones was Unlimited Power. And he told his story, an overweight, struggling guy living in a 400 square foot apartment that he barely had enough money to go eat at a buffet, and he actually gave it. He was moved to actually give this money to a little boy that was taking his mother to dinner, and he didn't know where he was going to get his next meal. And he comes home and he's got a check for $1,000 in the mail from someone that had actually owed him money. And he says the secret to living is giving. So he started moving that. Then we go ahead and we move on to people like Jim Rohn, who was really the guy that launched Tony Robbins, and then Zig Ziglar. And then you go with Bob Proctor, and you go with Napoleon Hill. And most recently, Tom Morris, who I affectionately call PhD. Here's a guy that now he's in his 70s, but he got a double PhD from Yale, PhD in philosophy, PhD in religion. He said, I wanted to know what man was thinking. I wanted to know what God was thinking. And he's one of the most educated, great, solid minds in the history of the planet. And he ultimately came up to, people ask him, what's the meaning of life? And part of the phrase is, well, it's the meaning you give it, and that's partially true. But here's what he said. It is to be lovingly creative and to creatively love. And I think that summarizes really, that is the meaning. That's the purpose. That's why we're all here. So how beautiful. So there's a list of people. you tap into what they shared and add your own spin to it, you've got a beautiful life ahead of you.
Yeah, I've numerous occasions, and this is my own fault, no fault but my own, where I'd be recommended maybe one or two or three books at a certain time, and I would pick one of them and I would maybe forget about the other two. Do you have some kind of a system where you go, okay, I'm going to read X amount of books or learn around this kind of topic throughout the year? Do you set a goal for yourself in the year to kind of say, I'm going to get through the X amount of resources? Or are you a little bit more relaxed and casual with that?
Well, let's go with what Jim Rohn said. So I started studying Jim Rohn in, might have been the 1980s, but it certainly was the early 1990s. I met him in person. I've got an autographed journal, and he's got a book that was life-changing, 7 Strategies for Wealth, Success, and Happiness. And he told his story. He was a farm boy from Idaho that didn't have any money. And, he was just really, really struggling. And he got a mentor. And this mentor said, well, Jim, let's take a look at your goals. He says, show me your goal list. He says, well, I don't have it. You mean you don't have it with you, or you don't have it? He says, well, I don't have it. He says, well, I bet I can guess your bank balance, and he says, you don't have any goals. You're probably your whole life has fallen apart. So he says, let's get going on that. Let's make a list of goals. Right. But ultimately, when he gave him these strategies, he said, you must read 30 minutes a day. All leaders are readers. Now, Warren Buffett, 8 hours a day. Think about that. And he's been doing that for probably 80 years. He's in his 90s now. Was at one point the richest man on the planet. But he said, miss a meal, but don't miss your 30 minutes of reading. So I guarantee you it was 15 years that I never missed my 30 minutes of reading, and I've never missed 30 minutes of information unless there was something really profound. Let's say maybe there's 10 days in the last 3 decades that I missed 30 minutes of growing and learning, but I transitioned at some point to audiobooks. And so I have over 400 audiobooks in my collection, and I promise you, I've listened to most of them more than once. So here's what Tom Morris said: if a book is not worth reading twice, it's not worth reading once. Now think about that. And he's read books 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Or let's go with Bob Proctor, who read Think and Grow Rich for 60 years. For 60 years. Now, do you need variety? If all the wisdom is between 2 covers and Bob kept reading, why not dedicate your life to the studying of that? And ultimately what Bob Proctor's mentor told him, I'll think of his name. His first name was Ray.
Ray Stanford.
He said, Napoleon Hill spent, essentially his entire life gathering this information from 500 of the richest people on the planet. I suggest that you spend the rest of your life studying it and applying it. And, the last time I saw Bob Proctor in person was at a conference in Las Vegas. And he said, by the way, he says, after this, I'm getting on my private jet and I'm flying home. So I don't leave when the airline says I leave when I'm ready to. He says, what the heck? It's only money. But essentially when you make hundreds of millions, and he did great things with his money as well, not just being so extravagant, you realize that success does leave clues. So absolutely I have a strategy. Absolutely. Always do. And I'm on a Tom Morris binge. So I've read 10 Tom Morris books in the last 3 months. And by the way, the average one is between 400 and 500 pages. So very captivating, very captivating.
Okay, so guys, we have our parameters. What's possible. The likes of Bob as well. I do remember, having such a charitable heart as well. I believe he had himself and Sandy Gallagher set up numerous schools in Africa as well that they did every single year. So it's so great to be able to give back in that regard. But outside of the operating system, making those conscious decisions, I want to go inside the body a little bit and talk about the systems that affect the brain. So when it comes to our brain chemistry, how significant is the brain chemistry structure when it comes to our mood and our whole thought pattern?
Well, medicine's going to tell you it's beyond critical, but I'm not fully convinced of that at this point. So are the mind and the brain the same thing? And science is even saying, no, they're not. They're really not, right? The mind is very, very different. And so it might have been Bob Proctor that said, listen, Einstein's brain is still in a jar in New York. Listen, it's not doing him any good because Albert's not in it anymore, and that mind and that contribution really goes far and beyond. But when you start looking at the power of the mind and maybe the higher mental faculties, you come to realize that it's all critical. But a thought is going to stimulate brain chemistry, and brain chemistry, it's a two-way street. If it starts firing in a certain direction, you're more likely to have certain thoughts. But what if we took someone who was just profoundly depressed? I mean, I want to jump off a bridge now depressed. And all of a sudden they're, like I look at my beautiful granddaughters right now, and you put one of them in front of me and every fiber of my being just screams with joy and happiness and gratefulness for the miracle of life. And you just sit back, and I can't have a bad moment when something moves my soul like that. And I believe there's something out there for everybody. I don't know what it is for everybody, and it probably changes at different points in life. I've got a Facebook friend that's going through a really, really, really hard time and thinking that she doesn't want to be here anymore, but yet she's got a grandbaby due. And I said, let me tell you what my grandchildren do for me. You owe it to yourself to be here for that. And then that will be your sanctuary. That will be your oasis. And by the way, Tom Morris, in this series of historical fiction novels, which are deep in philosophy, one of the concepts is the oasis within. So there's a 70-year-old uncle walking around with his 14-year-old nephew, and they're going through the desert, and it's a very rough journey, and they get to an oasis. And he says, well, uncle, can't we just stay at the oasis all the time? It's so much nicer here. And he says, no, we've got a place to be and we've got things to do. But the secret of life is to realize that there's an oasis within. And if you learn how to access it consistently, you can create your own paradise wherever you are. And that's really what that whole series of novels is all about. And what wonderful wisdom.
Beautiful. I really appreciate that. So really the chemistry, I like the connection between the thought creating the chemistry and not necessarily the other way around, because sometimes I think that can be a bit confusing for some people. But when it comes to gut health, I know this definitely plays a big role. Why should people really pay attention to their gut health if they're really serious about maximizing their brain function, but also their overall health? What's the connection between the gut?
Yeah, so the gut-brain connection is now absolutely indisputable. And let me tell you about the first real epiphany that I had in my journey of health, studying the gut and studying the brain. And it turned out to be Discover magazine cover story. It was a story on autism 2 decades ago. And it said the problem may not be in the brain, the problem may be in the gut. And within this article, they said if you were to actually take a stool, what comes out of the gut, out of the backside after the body's done processing it, of an autistic kid versus a child that's not, he says, you will be able to tell who's autistic and who's not just by the stool. There's that much of a difference. And by the way, the difference would really be all the way through the digestive tract. And it would be the bugs and not just the toxins, but the nutrients and the neurochemistry. And there was a medical doctor named Michael Gerson who wrote a book decades ago called The Second Brain. And he said the gut was the second brain. But as you dissect that, you come to realize if we looked at volume of brain chemistry or neurochemistry, the gut would be the primary brain. It has far more of those chemicals that we associate with our brain than our brain has.
Wow. For the likes of, and I wanted to talk about protocol. Actually, I'll ask that question within the protocol. So, what are some of the nutritional protocols you would recommend then for optimum brain health, but also optimum gut health that people should check off the list on a daily basis?
Well, I'm going to go with all 7. Of course, you got to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right. But when we start talking about the gut, I've told people now for decades, and by the way, I have gastroenterologists as a patient, and they haven't been taught almost any of this stuff. So picture they are medical specialists in the gut. And when people have a gut problem, here's what's known. At least 50% of the time, it's a functional problem. It's not a pathology. There's just something not working right in the gut. And I say there's 5 things that we need to answer. Number 1, what are you eating? Absolutely critical. One man's food is another man's poison. Number 2, how's your digestion? And there's so many people that have very, very, very poor digestion. Number 3, what kind of bugs live in your gut? All the difference between good bugs and bad is what they eat and what they poop. Good bugs eat poop, poop nutrients. Bad bugs eat nutrients, poop toxins. And there's more of them than us. The book is called 10% Human, and it describes all of our DNA. We're 90% bug DNA, 10% human DNA. Next conversation, how often do you poop? If you poop too much, too fast, that's malabsorption. If you don't poop enough or frequent enough, now you're absorbing more toxins. And finally, do you have a leaky gut? And when I teach that at seminars, I'll show a picture of a shark tube. There's a glass tube going through a big aquarium where there are great white sharks around. And if you have a leaky gut, what's in the gut gets into the circulation into the body before it's ready or digested. I said, so imagine if that shark tube were leaky and you were out among those predators. You might not want to be there, right? But those 5 questions will solve nearly every gut problem. But now let's take it another level. It may well solve the brain problem. But while we're talking about the mind, I was introduced to a new mentor, an absolute sage of wisdom. But when I say introduce, virtually and through his books, his name is Mo Gaudat. And he was a Google researcher, and this guy was an absolute sage of wisdom, and his son died. His son was his best friend. He was in his early 20s, a very routine surgical procedure. He died. And so he wrote a book about happiness and how to find happiness, and ultimately he had a formula for it. But he said, when your expectations, when your results exceed your expectations, you're happy. When your results fall short of your expectations, you're sad. So that was the simple equation. But he wrote another book about the voices in your head. And here's what he said. Very often, those aren't your own. And they've done functional magnetic resonance imaging where everybody, or not everybody, I should say, is aware of voices in their head. I personally think aloud. I don't have other things coming from other sources, but they've actually found out those voices in your head, in many cases, they're not your own. So imagine studying that with magnetic resonance imaging. And I had a woman that was having problems with the voices of her head that I did a consult with this week. And I shared with her a young lady who had multiple suicide attempts, was self-mutilating and cutting, was in 5 different mental hospitals, was a high school dropout and no hope on life. And then fast forward, changing her diet, changing her nutrition, changing her lifestyle. She ultimately got a scholarship to SMU, a very elite university, got a law degree, is a practicing attorney, is happily married with kids. And there was a point where she couldn't even see looking forward to tomorrow. So, there's ways to calm these influences that drive our brain, but it's very comprehensive. But diet's a critical part. Gut health is a critical part. Dot the I's, cross the T's.
Excellent. You mentioned something very important. Everyone is unique. Everyone is different, and like I said, not just to plug Dr. Bob's skill set, but if you do want that individual guidance, then, please reach out to Dr. Bob, naturalmedcenter@gmail.com, and you can arrange, a consultation in that regard, because what you don't know, you don't know. And I highly agree in investing in mentors and things that can, people and resources that really put you into a better state, so you go out and live a more quality of your life, not just about the quantity of your life. And just when you mentioned the word calm, something really clicked with me, which was medicinal mushrooms, the impact that medicinal mushrooms have on our mental calmness, our focus, and our energy output. Can you just speak to what are some of these wondrous health benefits of medicinal mushrooms like organic reishi that we love and share, that are so powerful for the brain, but the entire body?
Well, where do you even start with this, right? So first, let's go, do we have a history of safety and efficacy? Sure. Going back at least 5,000 documented years, there was a time when reishi was reserved only for royalty. And if you were caught without it, first offense, they'd cut off your arm. Second offense, they'd cut off your head, because the royalty said, this is so good, we need it. And, there wasn't an abundant supply like there is now. Now we have USDA certified organic suppliers that have really upped the game with all of it, but very, very powerful. But, when you start looking at what it does to the brain, first and foremost, it's going to cross the blood-brain barrier. But when you start talking about calmness and focus, I know that was your big takeaway immediately, and how amazing. But someone might say, well, I'm depressed. I'm going to need to be calm. I need to have a pick-me-up. Well, guess what? It can make you happy. It can make you more energetic. It can make you more focused. It can give you better memory. All these things are possible because it has over 430 unique molecules that combined. There's not a single plant that has yet been studied or discovered that has that degree of safety and efficacy in one package. And maybe there's one out there, we just haven't found it yet. But since we know this is the king of herbs, and some will call it the miraculous king of herbs, why not put it in your body? So, as you saw, I was making myself a drink, and you probably also saw that I went through it. And how about this cup, right? This was a gift from a cancer patient that I helped through a very big struggle. And she knew I'd go earthing, and I live in a golf course community. And part of what I'd like to do is walk my dog, connect with the earth. And treasure hunting, I'd find golf balls. I found thousands of them. And, so could I afford to buy 1,000 golf balls? Sure. But there's just something fun about finding it, something about finding that little diamond in the rough and that little search and going a little bit beyond and seeing what other people don't see. And that could be a good metaphor for life. If we can see in others what they can't see in themselves, and maybe we go back to Hannah saying she couldn't see the next month of her life, let alone a beautiful decade and a wonderful marriage. And guess what? Beat aggressive brain cancer twice. Wow, how beautiful.
And I know you mentioned that reishi was a big part of her protocol as well. And I remember, Pete, when we started preparing for our functional fat loss challenge to raise funds for Hannah's treatment, Pete had mentioned that Hannah had quadrupled her intake of reishi. Can you just speak to its powerful benefits for the protective benefits then for not only the brain, but for all the cells of the body?
Well, let's go first and foremost to cancer, because we brought it up. And, I was at a cancer lecture 35 years ago. PhD researcher Brainiac Dean Black walked into a room of doctors and he asked, how does a hurricane start? And the answer he wanted was, a hurricane starts when conditions are just right. How's a tornado start? When conditions are just right. How does cancer start? When conditions are just right. How does cancer go away? We change those conditions. So the conditions of cancer: low oxygen, low nutrients, high acid, chronic inflammation, and immune suppression secondary to chronic distress. So all those things that I just mentioned, reishi or Ganoderma is known to help that, along with having direct and immunologic benefit against over 15 different cancers, including glioblastoma, the most aggressive brain cancer, or breast cancer, the most common cancer in women, or prostate cancer, the most common cancer in men, or pancreatic cancer, considered one of the most aggressive body cancers, or lung cancer, that which kills so many people. It's proven directly against all those, as well as unwinding the perfect storm. And then you start looking at being an anti-inflammatory and alkalizing, and being an antimicrobial, and even being able to block replication of the HIV virus, and even the virus that got the attention of the world, over this last year. I tell people, it was March of 2020 that there was a study that came out of China, and they looked at people that were battling this virus. And if people did just conventional therapies, medical therapies, versus conventional and traditional Chinese medicine, which most certainly included reishi, if they included traditional Chinese medicine, the survivability increased by nearly 28x. It was 27 point something. You look at that and you might ask the question, why in the world, when that was known in March of 2020, was this not standard of care across the world? It's a very interesting question. But listen, now we know. So, if you don't know, well, okay, fine. You get a little bit of a pass, but now that you do know, now we got to do.
Yeah, I was being very selective of who I shared that study with, for sure, when that came out, but very exciting stuff to see the power of what this is proven to do. And if you want to do your own research, we do have a Facebook group you guys can be part of to learn more about some of those case studies. We cannot make health claims, but the research is there. If you go onto pubmed.gov, you can search any health condition that Dr. Bob mentioned, and reishi, also known as Ganoderma or Lingzi, and you will see studies there. Dr. Bob, before we move on just from that specific topic, do you have any references for studies for acetylcholine, for a dopamine, that I know you brought up on a slide before, just for anyone who's seeing this for the first time, that really ties in with the function of the brain and how we can really clue in our mindset? Because for myself, I really struggled with focusing on one task at a time. That was my biggest stressor, was really focusing, because I'm a very high energy person, but controlling that sometimes can be a challenge. And we all have our little things we have to work on. But for me, this was a big frustration for me. And I immediately felt zeroed in, focused, energized, calm, centered. My output was going up. And this is where I really started to become fascinated when my mum had a huge reduction in pain in her hands within 48 hours. And she had struggled with that for 10 plus years. So, oh yes, this is the slide here. This is fascinating, Dr. Bob. This actual slide alone, for anyone who wants to up their mental game, this is the money shot right here for me, for what this is proven to do. Can you go through this, Dr. Bob, and just touch on what are some of the significant points on that?
Sure. And so I list the PubMed IDs. And so literally, if people just wanted to type in PMID : and then let's start with 288-77835, you'll find a study. And I didn't call out exactly, was that serotonin, GABA, acetylcholine, dopamine, or all the above, but all those references below all support that Ganoderma is a powerful modulator modulator, meaning if you need to pick it up, and by the way, there's a sweet spot with brain chemistry. When we start looking at serotonin, we know it's a happy molecule, but there are tumors that produce serotonin, and it can become pathological, and you can die from serotonin overdose. It's fascinating. And then there's GABA, and the right amount of GABA, well, you feel really, really good. Too much GABA, you're unconscious. No GABA, you're not balancing the excitatory brain chemistry, glutamate, and you'll have a seizure. And you can seize to the point of dying. Acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter of memory, and I tell people the stats are very, very clear in terms of what people are concerned about. Before the age of 55 in this part of the world, people are most concerned about cancer. I'm amazed that it shifts as young as 55, but after 55, people are worried about losing their mind before their time on earth is done. And it just happens to too many people. And then we go with dopamine, and there's 3 different sections of the brain: the frontal cortex, which is concentration, that helped you a whole bit; substantia nigra, which is fine motor control. If you don't have dopamine, you have tremors, Parkinson's. If you have dopamine, you're smooth and you can do whatever you want. And then there's something called the nucleus accumbens, which is pure joy, even euphoria. And keep in mind, can you get too much joy? Sure. And, sadly, cocaine does that. It drives people to this level of euphoria. And some people are instantly addicted because, oh my gosh, I want some of that again. But, we can create such levels of joy if we're able to do it. And you know what? I'm going to segue real quick, just because I had opened this up. Let me stop the share. When I was getting ready for this presentation, I was thinking about mindset driving so many amazing things. And when you start looking at it, I really love the wisdom of Sadhguru. And Sadhguru made this very interesting statement. He was talking about having the right, not just mindset, but heart set, but soul set, and everything all together. And let me share his little point here, because he's such a good storyteller. And here's what he says. He says, you know what? Our universe quite essentially has an infinite number of doors. And he says, you know what? If you're smart, you're going to open a few doors. If you're brilliant, you will open many doors. But essentially, when you're connected to your best self, to your highest purpose, the doors will open for you. And I thought, what wisdom is that? And I hope that everybody has had that experience in their life when they get aligned with their purpose, in the right group, with the right people, with the right mission, with the right purpose, that suddenly and very, very magically, the whole universe opens up to them. And you know what? That's what you're about, what I'm about, in different words, but all things health, happiness, success, impacting hundreds of thousands. And a good step towards it is that herb of immortality, that miraculous king of herbs, Reishi. And we get to share it in coffee and tea and my CXT and all these beautiful things that people do every single day.
I really resonate with what you just said there, and Sherry there, Dr. Bob, because I think if we all have arrived in that, with our feet planted firmly on the ground, knowing who we are, what we stand for, and whatever vehicle we have to allow people to live their best life, those doors will swing open. And you can sense that with people when they're really in that vibration, and really when they're not in that vibration. So I think a good check for a lot of people is, if you're not where you really want to be, is check your vibration, check really where your belief level is at, and really reassess what is the energy you're emitting and who are you looking to serve. Because once you're clear with that, those doors opening are like those people that you want to serve. They're there. You're expecting to meet that person. You want to serve that person, and you're going to wear your mission and your heart on your sleeve. So our mission, quite simply, was to really impact the lives of 100,000 people over the next year. That's our goal. We want to really impact those people in ways that people want to take on board new habits, because habits are not easily taken on board. But when you've got this superfood we've been speaking about infused in a habit like coffee or tea or energy drinks, as Dr. Bob was enjoying there as well, it's so powerful, and regular coffee, although a lot of people run on it, if you have too much, can really kick off the excitatory nerves in the body too much. It can overstimulate the body and leave you quite jittery. Why are our partners, Dr. Bob, Organo, a much better choice having a reishi-infused option?
That's a big part of what you just said. The fact that people can get jittery and then they can have a crash, and then often they crave more of it, but they get into this vicious cycle. So when we start talking about the effects on the central nervous system, one of the first things people see is, oh my gosh, I'm not jittery. This is a very smooth, beautiful energy. When you look at regular coffee, it's acidic, and acid's the number one toxin within the body. There's a book written years ago called Alkalize or Die. And I always like to look at the positive. How about alkalize and thrive? But really both things are true. As you let that acid accumulate, you're going to be in trouble. And why would you want to pour more acid into the system? And that's what people are doing with regular coffee. And you start looking at the stress buffering benefits and the ability to detoxify and then to modulate the inflammatory process and support the immune system and, kill off cancers before the body, before any doctor could detect it. We all get cancer cells every day, or at least it's now said that probably 99.99% of us, they can't say 100% of anything with everybody all the time, but 99.9%, that's a big number. So why not unwind that perfect storm consistently and support the immune system consistently? And why not do it in a way that people never need to be reminded and never plan to quit? Part of the way that I make the world better and what I have a passion about is nutrition. And we know food is not what it used to be. If you don't know that, you don't have to look very far to figure that out. There's now literally thousands of studies on that. So we all need some type of supplemental benefit. And what if we could just get what we needed in coffee and tea, things that we did consistently? How beautiful. Now, will that do it for everybody? No, some people are in a big hole and they're going to need more than that. But, listen, it picked up the Irish Superman. So think about that for a moment. If you can take the best and make them a little better, which it does for my Olympians and my world champions, why not for you?
Absolutely. And of course, our partners Organo have just released in the US and Canada a triple medicinal mushroom blend, which I can hardly speak because of the excitement of this, because I know it has one of my other favorite medicinal mushrooms is cordyceps for performance, and also getting your mind in the game when it comes to high performance. So what's so special about this triple blend? We have lion's mane, reishi, and cordyceps in a coffee. Tell us about that, Dr. Bob, and we'll wrap up.
Well, how fun that those are the big three, So, I'm always looking at information. Organo is as well. And so the top mushroom in the world happens to be shiitake. That's a food grade mushroom. And so, you might eat a pound of that. Well, that's a bit much, but I could, in a sitting. But when you start looking at milligram doses, and then those add up, you got reishi number 1, cordyceps number 2, lion's mane number 3, the big 3 in terms of the world just asking for these. The medicinal mushroom market now over $25 billion a year. And how's it getting there? It's absolutely demand. And, I'll tell a little story. So Paul Stamets is the world's foremost authority on medicinal mushrooms. Huge fan of reishi or Ganoderma, cordyceps, lion's mane. But he was asked by the US Department of Defense after 9/11 to figure out if we had a bioterrorist attack and they released something like anthrax, do medicinal mushrooms offer protection? And here's what he found out: whether it's anthrax, whether it's HIV, whether it's whatever, even this most recent virus, and it took a while to prove it in direct, undisputable clinical studies, it can beat it. And so what if we just consistently had that on board? Now Einstein said the most important question we could answer for ourselves is, do we live in a friendly or a hostile universe? Maybe the answer is both. But if we put reishi in our body consistently, it's a lot more friendly. And if we don't have it in there, it's more likely to be hostile. So why not do it consistently and make our wonderful world better?
There we go. No, I couldn't put it any better myself. I usually say to people, just prep for war. We're always going to be prepping for some kind of war, internally and externally, and be ready, because if you're not ready, you're going to get served with a dish you probably won't like the taste of. So guys, great call, great information. If you've any quick questions, pop it in the chat, but we have just gone over time. Next week, we will be talking about hormones, our imbalanced hormones holding you back. So that's going to be a topic for next week. We will be revisiting a business conversation on Saturday, talking about some of the new expansions, new ideas, ways for people to add this to their arsenal to create another income stream, or as Dr. Bob would call it, Plan B, brilliant being the B. Because it creates so much abundance and just positivity around the world for people to go out and live their best life. So I don't see questions here. I don't see questions on Instagram. So Dr. Bob, I will leave the last words to you. We really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day to share this knowledge. We will have a second call, I believe, today with Carl Humphreys at 6 p.m. Central, I believe that's the right time for Houston.
You're exactly right. So why not wrap up with Jim Rohn, who is such a king of mindset? And he would wrap up with 4 questions. So here they are. First question is why? Why'd you take the time to join us today? There's so many other things you could do. Second question is the answer to the first. Why not? Why not learn about something that is proven over 5,000 years of use to make the world better? And why not connect with people that are sharing and growing and expanding and creating extraordinary lives for themselves and others? Third question is why not you? Someone's going to say, this makes sense. I want to step up my game. And the final question is why not now? So the longer you wait to act on information, the least likely you are to act on it. Make a better choice, make consistent better choices. And you know what? Why not try some of our Reishi-infused products? So whoever referred you to this Zoom or this replay or this YouTube or wherever you're getting it, reach back to that person. We're invested in the business, but you know what? We're invested in a better world. So we don't care how you get it. Just get it and get good quality stuff and get it consistently. And as always, I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, absolutely knowing that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful. So good night in that part of the world, good day in this part of the world, and God bless in all parts of the world.